Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Private Hannah Bailey. We warmly welcome the family of Private Samuel Weingott, whose story will be told shortly. We're honoured to acknowledge Air Chief Marshal Preacher Pradnmuk, Director General Defence Technology Institute, Thailand. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Samuel Weingott. Samuel Weingott was born in Sydney on 11th of May, 1893. His father, Harris, was born in Kalisz, Poland, and arrived in Australia with his family in 1883. 3 years later, Harris married Sarah Knopp, whose parents were also born in Poland, and the pair went on to raise a large family that followed the Jewish faith. The Weingott family lived in the Sydney suburb of Annandale, where Harris was well known as the head of the family business, Weingott and Sons waterproof clothing and oilskin manufacturers. Young Samuel Weingott attended Fort Street School, where he was a member of the cadets and afterward worked at the family business, which had an office on Sussex Street. By then, Samuel's parents had separated, and his father had remarried Caroline Welch, known as Lee. Following the declaration of war on the 4th of August 1914, Weingott was among the first to volunteer for service in the Australian Imperial Force. The 21-year-old enlisted on the 24th August, earning a spot in Alpha Company of the 1st Battalion, which was raised at Randwick within the first fortnight of the war. After a brief period of basic training, the 1st Battalion was among the first Australian troops to be deployed overseas, arriving in Egypt in early December. Weingott kept a diary during his service, with brief entries that vividly express his enjoyment of travelling through foreign lands, an experience heightened by the heady anticipation of the great adventure ahead. After training in the desert camp at Mina, Weingott and his battalion took part in the landing at Anzac Cove. Coming ashore with the 2nd and 3rd waves on 25th of April 1915. Weingott's diary entry, Sunday 25 April reads, arrived at the Gallipoli Peninsula at 5 o'clock a.m. when the battleship opened heavy fire on the enemy. Engaged the Turks from 12 o'clock noon Sunday till daybreak Monday. Elbow grazed by shrapnel. Our fellows suffer heavy casualties. During those early days, Weingott was rarely far from danger, noting instances such as called back to the firing line for equipment and had a narrow shave of being shot. I narrowly missed getting hit with the cap of a shell, very nearly blown to pieces by the enemy's heavy gunfire. A bomb thrown by the enemy lands alongside me. A shell buried itself in the parapet alongside me in 7 foot, but did not explode. The other blew one man to pieces, wounded one. As the excitement of leaving home died down, the smell of dead bodies from outside the trenches became impossible to avoid, and Weingott's diary entries became increasingly terse and dark. Mate of mine shot through the heart whilst asleep. Shell explodes in our trench. Terrible sights, men alongside of me blown to pieces, great morale effects on the troop. Many lose their nerves. Trenches blown to pieces, work all night fixing them up. On 25 May, Weingott reported that HMS Triumph, which had supported the main landing by the Anzac forces and continued to support them through May, had been sunk by an Austrian submarine. In sight of the Australian troops, 785 souls on board, 150 drowned, I read the burial service. Towards the end of the month, a shell burst in his face. Although unwounded, I was knocked out for a few minutes. My rifle twisted beyond recognition. Put off for the rest of the day. On 1st of June, there was much needed good news. Weingott reported that he had been appointed Lance Corporal in charge of a section and feel very proud. His spirits were further lifted the following day. Overhead, Lieutenant Lloyd say that I would make a good NCO, as I wasn't at all afraid. But Private Weingott's promotion was not to be confirmed. 4 days later, on 5th of June, he was admitted to a field ambulance with a gunshot wound that had perforated his lower abdomen. His wound was mortal, and he died aboard the hospital ship Cecilia as it made its way from Gallipoli to Malta and was buried at sea. Samuel Weingott was 22 years old. His family later received a letter from a fellow soldier at the front who reported that Samuel had volunteered to charge a position and in the charge received his mortal wounds. The Weingott family suffered more than many as a result of the fighting on Gallipoli. Samuel's older brother Alexander served with the 13th Battalion and died of wounds received during the landing. Alexander was the first soldier to be buried in the Jewish cemetery at Alexandria, with a funeral attended by representatives of the Jewish congregation of Alexandria and a service conducted by the chief rabbi. Another brother Baron, known as Barry, served with the 1st Field Company engineers and returned to Australia in 1919. Samuel Weingott's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Samuel Weingott, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.